A documentary portraying President Obama as a radical anti-colonialist out to destroy US global influence gains popularity. We examine the conspiracy theories surrounding the US president and ask why they persist. You're watching Inside Story US 2012 from Washington. Hello, I'm Shihab Rutansi. 2016, Obama's America. Love him, hate him, you don't know him. That's the title of a film by conservative author Dinesh D'Souza. He says he's showing Americans what truly motivates Obama and what they can expect if he's re-elected. D'Souza travels to Kenya to seek out what shaped Obama. He concludes that the US president was so hurt by his father's abandonment that he's adopted Barack Obama Sr.'s anti-colonialist views. As a result, the US president has been working to undermine US power through excessive government spending and reducing its military might. Conspiracy theories questioning whether Obama is a real American have surrounded the president since his 2008 campaign. Among them, the so-called birth of movement, which claims that Obama was not born in the United States and is therefore an illegitimate president. A poll released last month by the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life shows that 17% of Americans believe that Obama is a Muslim. And just a few weeks ago, during a television interview, a local judge from the US state of Texas warned that if Obama is re-elected, there would be a civil war in the US and that the president would have United Nations troops take over the country.
He is going to try to hand over the sovereignty of the United States to the UN. Okay, what's going to happen when that happens? I'm thinking worst case scenario.
Right,
okay?
I understand.
Civil unrest, civil disobedience, civil war, maybe. I mean, we're not talking just a few riots here and demonstrations. We're talking Lexington, Concord, take up arms and get rid of the guy. Okay, now what's going to happen if we do that? If the public decides to do that? He's going to send in UN troops.
So has President Obama been a greater target of lies and conspiracy theories than other US presidents? To discuss this, we're joined from Tampa, Florida by Rob Lorei, Director of News and Public Affairs for the Tampa community radio station WMNF. From Davis, California, we have Kathryn Olmsted, and the author of Real Enemies, Conspiracy Theories and American Democracy, World War I to 9/11. And here in the studio, we're joined by Simon Maloy, a research fellow with Media Matters. What we thought we'd do, first of all, though, is take a look at the role of truth in this election in the first place. There's been much comment about the Republican vice presidential candidate's speech at the convention on Wednesday. It was filled with attacks on President Obama like this one.
When he talked about change, many people liked the sound of it, especially in Janesville, where we were about to lose a major factory. A lot of guys I went to high school with worked at that GM plant. Right there at that plant, candidate Obama said, "I believe that if our government is there to support you, this plant will be here for another 100 years." That's what he said in 2008. Well, as it turned out, that plant didn't last another year. It is locked up and empty to this day.
Simon Maloy, why is that statement and other statements in the vice president's or the potential vice president's speech problematic?
Well, as a number of fact-checking organizations, journalistic outfits have pointed out, it's not entirely accurate. What happened was that the plant in Janesville was scheduled to be closed, and the decision to actually close it was made during the Bush administration. And when Congressman Ryan implied that the plant's closure was somehow responsible, Obama was somehow responsible for the plant's closure, his policies, it just wasn't accurate, and he's been called out by several organizations.
And that wasn't the only inaccuracy in his speech?
No, there were several. There were, he talked about getting $716 billion from Medicare, which, again, same thing. Fact checkers, journalistic organizations have pointed out that the Ryan budget, of which he is best known, also has those same cuts to Medicare. It's the only part of the Obama healthcare bill that was not repealed by the Ryan budget. So when he says something like that, again, it's not exactly on the level.
Rob, Lorei, in Tampa, then, there was a sense, though, that even though there was a recognition of some of these untruths in the speech, it was still thought of as a powerful and brilliant performance. There seems to be quite a bit of leeway given. Is telling the truth, then, not really a requirement for political admiration or even to run for office anyway?
You know, I think the standards have suddenly become very low here in the U.S. I saw a politician today at a press conference who said that a lie detector should have been administered to the congressman as he was giving that speech. I think in America, in the U.S., the standards are slipping away from us, especially in the wake of Citizens United. More and more outrageous things are said, not just from podiums like the Ryan speech the other night, but in our television ads, which so power these campaigns. And the news media organizations have designed these fact-check organizations. Every major news organization has a fact-check system. But, you know, sometimes the public doesn't read those fact-check articles. So these untruths go through without any sort of commentary. There is one place, though, that fact checks get through to the popular imagination. That's through the comedy shows, especially Comedy Central with Jon Stewart, where he checks people and what they've said, checks their current quotes versus past quotes, and finds the contradictions. I
mean, clearly the Romney campaign has said that they're not going to be run by fact checkers, that they're quite open about this. And in fact, even Mitt Romney, the candidate, appears to be dealing in certain innuendo based on some of the conspiracy theories. Here's something that he said quite recently on the campaign trail.
Ann was born at Henry Ford Hospital. I was born at Harper Hospital. No one's ever asked to see my birth certificate. They know that this is the place that we were born and raised.
Professor Olmsted, as a historian of the conspiracy theories in politics, clearly I suppose that this idea of the birther issue is perhaps the most predictable, involving race and other things. But is it surprising that it's being alluded to by the top of the presidential candidate himself? Is it becoming more mainstream? Is there anything different about what's happening in this election cycle?
Well, I would agree that the standards appear to be lowering, that, you know, we've been on the decline for quite a while in American politics now, and we're reaching a new low in this election, that the candidate on the top of the ticket would, you know, refer to those conspiracy theories that have been proved over and over again, you know, not to have any basis in fact, is really disturbing.
But is it new, though? I mean, or have there allusions to this sort of thing? I mean, they've always been sort of out there, even by the mainstream press or even the top of the ticket.
Well, I think it's, you know, it was there in 2008, and certainly the whole birther movement has behind it this idea of race, and that we have a black president, and that therefore he is somehow suspect. I mean, there's been, throughout American history, there's been concerns that there would be un-Americans who would sneak into and infiltrate the US government. So this is nothing new. President Eisenhower was accused of being a communist agent. Bill Clinton was accused of all kinds of crimes. What's different about this is that I think it's a different dimension because it does involve race.
Rob, I mean, in Tampa, there does seem to be a constant theme at the convention, that Obama simply doesn't get America. You know, this is what we are. He doesn't get it. I mean, is it too much to connect some of these conspiracy theories to that sort of rhetoric?
No, I don't think so at all. I think they are trying to paint President Obama as an outsider and something that is un-American. You hear this phrase, well, he doesn't really understand America, or he doesn't get America. And this is the theme, not just here in Tampa, but it's been leading up to this campaign all across the country in the Republican primary. You've heard it over and over again. And I think the reason why it works, or at least one of the reasons it works, is that people have retreated into media camps in this country. They only watch, they only read the media that confirms their existing biases. And increasingly, media in this country has become partisan. In the 1960s and 50s, it was conservative, but I think it would be fair to say that it was less partisan. Now, our media is fragmenting. So you've got conservative media, you've got liberal media, and their power cannot be underestimated. So sometimes people who have a diet of Fox listen to nothing else, or people that listen to Rush Limbaugh and Fox don't go beyond their comfort zone.
All right, well, let's bring in this documentary that's been in the box office top 10 at this point. Dinesh D'Souza, right-wing author, and he presents himself very much above the tawdry fray of the birthers and of racism and so forth. He himself is of Indian descent, so perhaps that neutralizes some of those charges. He says he seems to be suggesting he has more of a historical, psychological analysis of President Obama. Here's a part of the trailer.
Obama has a dream from his father, that the sins of colonialism be set right and America be downsized.
It's been a long time coming, but tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
Simon Maloy, you and your colleagues at Media Matters have pretty rigorously fact-checked this film. How many of these allegations, how well does Dinesh D'Souza's thesis stand up to analysis?
It doesn't stand up very well, and it's curious. In the film, he makes a point to say that Barack Obama was born in Honolulu in 1961, and his birth was announced in 2 papers. So he tries very much to make clear that he's separating himself from what the other conspiracies, the birther conspiracy, what have you, and then he launches into his own conspiracy, which is based upon a lot of facts that really just don't check out. He says that the president has done nothing to stop a nuclear Iran, which is untrue. The president's ordered cyber attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities, approved sanctions. A sanction law was signed just last year. So much of what he brings to bear just does not stand up.
That he's actually perhaps contributing to an eventual United States of Islam.
Well, that's yes, in a bit of, I'd say, Glenn Beck-inspired bit of paranoia, you see on the map these tracing barbs of green and red and black encircling the Middle East and North Africa into what he calls the United States of Islam. There's not really any reason to think why that would actually happen, but it makes for a striking visual, I guess, and is very scary.
I mean, you've seen this film a few times. You've spoken to members of the audience. What do they say when you tell them key aspects of the film are false, or even that nuclear disarmament itself was a cherished dream of Ronald Reagan?
Well, exactly. I think this is a film very much that preaches to the converted. It's for the audience that already dislikes the president and is looking for something to reinforce that dislike. And so even when, after the showings that I went to, I chatted to with audience members and told them that Ronald Reagan also had this dream of a nuclear world and signed treaties with Russia, nuclear-free world, and signed treaties with Russia to reduce our nuclear stockpiles. They said, well, yes, that's a sane thing that anyone would believe, but their faith in D'Souza's message, their belief in D'Souza's thesis wasn't shaken by that.
Professor Olmsted, I mean, that suggests that although these conspiracy theories might be more widely disseminated now, they are relatively harmless and tend to appeal only to those who've already made up their minds. They didn't really have that huge effect on the political discourse.
Well, I wouldn't say that just because they appeal to the converted that they have no effect. They're very insidious in that they cause a lot of people to lose faith in the whole idea of making collective decisions, and they don't give any, I mean, when you believe that the President of the United States is not legitimate, that he's some sort of foreigner that's trying to undermine the Constitution, then why should you believe anything that the government says?
Rob, Lorei, I know you haven't actually seen this film, but clearly you can see the sort of things being posited as factual. I did see the film. My producer forced me to see it before this program. I haven't entirely forgiven her. But the only thing I wrote down in my notebook was, does he actually believe this? Or, I mean, I guess the question is, are they cynically constructing these conspiracy theories, these narratives, to achieve certain political ends? even if they don't believe it themselves. Rupert Murdoch, for example, is tweeting away saying, this is a great film, everyone should see it. I mean, did he really watch it and say, that's what Obama's up to, the world should know, or is it a more cynical process, you think?
Well, you know, I fear that in our country we have such a decline of intellectualism and a decline of just being able to analyze things from a thoughtful way. There's this phrase that goes out there, low information voters. That is, people that really don't rely on the facts, just need a little bit of information, then they make up their minds. I'm afraid that there's a huge number of Americans that engage in that. And you know, what's surprising to me is that I thought this would go away. I'm old enough to remember the John Birch Society in the 1960s, in the outrageous claims made that were kind of satirized in the film Dr. Strangelove, in which, you know, the Russians or some other evil group, the communists, were going to poison our water or, you know, take away our precious bodily fluids. And we all kind of laughed at the John Birch Society and thought it would never be revived. What's interesting now is that the John Birch Society, which prayed or put out those conspiracy theories, like the professor was saying about President Eisenhower, it's back, and it's more powerful than ever, and it's on the edges of this convention. And to me, it speaks volumes about, I think, the gullibility of many Americans.
I mean, let's run through another very popular conspiracy. Here's the Vice President and CEO of the National Rifle Association, Wayne LaPierre. He gave a speech recently at a conservative political action conference.
We see the president's strategy crystal clear. Get reelected, and with no more elections to worry about, get busy dismantling and destroying our firearms freedom.
Professor Olmsted, again, historically and contemporaneously, do those who put forward these conspiracy theories actually believe them, or are they just using them to ensure their political position is respected?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I think probably the NRA leaders might not believe that, but certainly I think the NRA members do. And, you know, that's what's behind the concern about the UN invading, is that it's all connected. That if they take our guns away and then the UN invades, then there's no way that we can defend ourselves.
I think it's helpful to examine the plausibility of the claim being made. Like, for example, that clip that we just heard from LaPierre, to erase the Second Amendment and strip gun rights from the United States is an undertaking that no president could accomplish in a mere 4 years with a supremely divided government. So when you have someone throwing out a theory that wild, that hard to achieve, you have to assume that there's a certain degree of cynicism behind it. It's meant just to rile up the people who, if the people who actually do believe it or would be made angry, would be made to vote against Obama.
But then how do we draw the line? I mean, surely there are things going on that we don't know about. I mean, how do we draw the line between a healthy skepticism about what we're being told and utter manipulation by interested parties, then, do you say?
I'd say the key is to really look at the facts that are brought to bear in defense of the argument. Going back to the D'Souza documentary 2016, the case that he lays out is so paltry, so thin. It's based on minutia and claims that really just don't stack up under any scrutiny whatsoever, that when all that falls apart, what are you left with? And it's really sort of just the cynical manipulation of the audience.
Professor Olmsted, a lot of the current fear seems to be bound up in a concept of American exceptionalism. I wonder whether you could just perhaps explain what that actually means very briefly, and whether there's any room within that concept for self-criticism or discussion.
Well, American exceptionalism is generally understood as the idea that America is different and therefore better than other nations because it has this exceptional history. I think that one of the difficulties that Americans have had throughout history is sort of defining what it means to be an American, because America is a nation of immigrants, a nation of diverse immigrants. And so there's this concern about, we have this exceptional nation, we have this democratic experiment. How do we make sure that the wrong people don't come in and subvert our wonderful, exceptional democracy? And so there's been, throughout American history, this concern about determining who's the enemy, who's un-American. If you can't really say that an American is a certain ethnic group or racial group or religion, then how do you define what is an American? Well, you define an American by defining what an American is not. And so that's why you have the House Un-American Activities Committee and all of this concern about, is the current president somehow un-American? Is he one of them posing as one of us?
But Rob, Lorei, from where you are there, I mean, we have these speeches that seem to suggest that even to discuss whether the rich are paying their fair share or whether foreign wars are sustainable is somehow un-American, even though the polls seem to suggest that more and more people are asking those questions. Actually, even within the Republican Party, I mean, Ron Paul, after all, was the runner-up in the leadership contest.
Last night here at the convention, Rand Paul touched on that subject. He said Republicans should be ready to question the military budget. And the next step of that is whether or not the wars of the last 10 years have been justified. It's interesting, even at the Republican convention last night, there were several people with anti-war T-shirts. The Ron Paul faction within the Republican convention here is quite mad at their treatment. Some walked out last night. And I think it's fair to say that a sizable number of them have joined Ron Paul's movement because they're against U.S. foreign policy and they're against American military spending. So there are cracks in, I can say that probably 4 years ago or 8 years ago, you wouldn't have heard that talk on the floor here of the Republican convention.
Simon, I mean, in some ways it seems in the current cycle, the fear of many of those who oppose the Republicans seems to be based on stated positions on female reproductive health or taxation or the environment or environmental regulation and so forth. Those who oppose Obama seem to gain a lot of their fear from unspoken positions on the right wing, based on conspiracies about anti-colonial aspirations, but even on the left, actually, based on the first term, on President Obama pretending to be progressive, but actually being utterly subservient to corporate interests.
Well, I think there's a lot of, there's a certain bit of people projecting what they want to believe onto the president. I think he's uniquely susceptible to that phenomenon. And so on the left, you have a lot of discontent because he's not the crusading anti-war liberal that a lot of people believed him to be, without a whole lot of justification based on his campaign rhetoric and the policies that he's put forth as president. On the right, you have, again, as Professor Olmsted was talking about, this sort of ingrained fear of the subversive factor coming in to undermine America. And Obama, as a Democratic president, I think, is uniquely susceptible to that projection, given who he is and his history.
How does it affect politics in the U.S. and the future of the U.S.?
Well, yeah, again, I wouldn't say that it has no effect, because I think if you have people saying these things that aren't true, that after a while people just sort of throw up their hands and say, well, you can never tell what's true. And that allows politicians to get away with more and more lies.
But Rob, do you detect any signs that, I mean, you mentioned the Ron Paul faction and so forth. Is there a natural cycle to these things? Might change be around the corner? Might people be rebelling against this kind of discourse in political life in the U.S.?
Well, let's hope there's a renewed intellectualism in the U.S. I'm not going to predict that anytime soon. There is a cycle to this, and I think it happened to FDR and the allegations that he was Jewish, President Roosevelt. We heard about President Eisenhower, suspected of being an ally of the communists. John Kennedy was terribly attacked. I think Jimmy Carter was one of the few Democrats to avoid those conspiracy theories. But then, when we got to the Bill Clinton administration, as the professor just said, he was viciously attacked with conspiracy theories. And it seems like it's most prominent when you have a Democratic administration. I'm sure the left has its conspiracy theories about Richard Nixon and George W. Bush, but these current conspiracy theories are organized. They have a movement. There's a new movement called Agenda 21 that's allied with the people that think that the UN is going to take over. They have cells here in Hillsborough County in Tampa where they have private meetings to discuss their fears, and they're trying their best to avoid any sort of publicity. But I think the movement is not going away, and I think the only antidote is to bring this stuff into the light and have people question I think, more, and let's do a better job being more intellectual about our history.
But very briefly, Simon Maloy, I mean, is the difference now, though, that there's so much money involved in propagating these theories, and even big-budget films and so forth, and so many vested interest in perhaps keeping these conspiracy theories alive, that we are in quite a precarious position for democracy?
I think they are useful to certain people who would exploit them for partisan gain. I also think that you can't discount the economic factor in all this when jobs are not readily available and people are searching for something to blame, something to push all of their anxieties
perhaps to
onto.
vote against their own interests.
Exactly, yeah. I think conspiracies become more attractive.
All right, and that's all from the team in Washington, D.C. for now.